A very warm welcome to the official BingX tutorial video. Today, we'll take a look at how the platform works, how you can deposit funds later on, and of course, how to execute trades yourself. There's definitely a lot planned for today's video, so make sure to stick around until the end. It's definitely worth it because at the end of the video, I'll be sharing my personal trading strategy with you. We'll also be executing live trades later, so you can look over my shoulder and watch how I personally approach my own trading strategy and how I've managed to earn up to $400 a day. So it's definitely worth staying until the end today. Otherwise, I'd like to warmly welcome you to my English YouTube channel. Here, all YouTube videos from my German channel are translated into English using AI, so you'll definitely be kept informed. I'm a real person myself, but everything is translated from German into English so that you're always up to date. Of course, feel free to like and subscribe to this channel as well. Now let's get started with the tutorial for BingX. We'll be taking a look at everything from A to Z in just a moment, so don't worry about a thing. Otherwise, the first important step is of course to create an account on BingX. I've definitely linked the BingX platform in my video description. It's the very first link where you can sign up using my exclusive Crypto Vincent link. Only through my link will you get VIP status right away, which means you can save on fees, and on top of that, you'll receive some really great welcome gifts. You can see it right here. Depending on how much you deposit, you can snag quite a bit here. Later, you'll be notified about this in your dashboard via the bell icon. Depending on how much you deposit, you'll also receive a completely free trading bonus on top as a gift. As I said, all of this is only available through the link in my video description or simply by entering Crypto Vincent as the referral code, just so you're aware. Once you've created an account on the BingX platform, you'll see the option at the top left to buy cryptocurrencies directly. Here you basically have the option to purchase USDT directly using a Visa credit card or MasterCard. Here you can basically choose how much you want to deposit, for example, $2,000 US. Then you'll receive the equivalent amount in USDT credited to your account. You can click on buy here and you'll have several options available. You can even theoretically deposit funds using Google Pay or by credit card or debit card, which is definitely the standard method here. This way you can basically buy cryptocurrencies directly on the platform once you've completed the verification process. That's definitely important to mention. Otherwise, if you already have cryptocurrencies or if you purchase cryptocurrencies later, you can click on assets at the top right. Then you'll see your spot account where all your assets will be stored later, as well as the fund account where you'll see your USDT. This is what your dashboard will look like later. In the fund account, you'll have an overview of everything, or you can also click on overview here and you'll notice that I've deposited a total of $1,500 into my futures account. I've already transferred it directly as well. If you have any questions here, when you go to overview, you'll later have the option to click on transfer, and then you can move all your assets from your fund account over to your futures account, for example via USDT. Of course, it also works the other way around, depending on what you have available. Here you can transfer from the spot account over to the futures account. At the end of the day, it's extremely important that you always transfer everything over to your standard futures account because that's where all trades will be executed later. And of course, depending on the deposit you've made, you'll be notified here via the bell about what kind of bonus you have available. Alternatively, you can also click on New Users Exclusive and you'll definitely have the chance to claim up to 500 USDT here, depending on how much you've deposited. And of course, after you've completed your verification, you'll also receive an additional bonus. Now, we'll definitely move on to the topic of trading. I'm going to show you directly what it all looks like later on. That's important to mention. Let's quickly go back to the home page. Once you're back on the home page, here's another quick tip. Click this button at the top right, and you'll have everything nicely in dark mode. It's definitely much more pleasant that way. Now let's move on to the topic of trading. Once you've deposited your assets and transferred them, in this case from transfer to your futures account, you can later click on derivatives here and then on futures overview. Click on it once and you'll see all the options for how you can use the futures market. And in our case, we'll definitely go with perpetual futures. This is definitely the standard mode, so to speak. Yes, here we have the option to trade Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and others via futures positions with leverage, just like normal. So let's click on it and this is what it will look like later. I know it's pretty complicated, especially at the beginning. We can also just click away this warning here. I know at the beginning it's very confusing. There are a ton of numbers here, but we'll go through everything step by step in a calm manner so you'll know exactly what matters, what's important to pay attention to, and how to set everything up correctly. Here you have the chart, in this case for Bitcoin. It's definitely very convenient because there's a TradingView integration here. This means we have all the tools and techniques from TradingView right here, so we can use all the indicators, tools, and analysis methods directly from this bar here, officially from TradingView. That's definitely a huge advantage with BingX, which I really like a lot. What we also have as an option here is that we can later set up indicators here. We'll get into that in more detail later, specifically regarding my personal trading strategy. So make sure to stick around until the end because I'll be showing exactly how I'll be applying my trading strategy here on BingX. Now let's get a bit more specific about explaining what this whole interface is about. Here we have the order book, where you can see live how many short positions are being opened at the current moment and how many long positions. Of course, it's quite nice to follow and observe all of this live, but from experience you won't really need this very often. To be honest, it's actually not particularly relevant. That's why we'll go straight over to the right side, to the extremely important side when it comes to trading. And now I'm going to explain everything step by step. Here we have two ways to open positions in the market. One is with a limit order. With a limit order, you basically have the option to set a price in advance at which the trade should be opened. So we can position ourselves in advance before the price even reaches this price range. For example, I could now say, hey, as soon as Bitcoin reaches 110,000 US dollars again, so we can set that here, then I want to open a trade. This would be a way to demonstrate how it works. Here, you basically have the option to set what the amount should be. In this case, always make sure to select by cost USDT. This way, you definitely have the best overview, and then we can enter everything here again. 110,000 US dollars in the case of Bitcoin, and then, for example, I can put $100 into my trade here, open a long position, and what happens is that the position won't be opened immediately, but only once Bitcoin reaches 110,000 US dollars. And you'll also be able to see all of this later here in the chart. Here you can see my limit position. Then we can click on open orders here, and you'll see that the order has basically been placed in the market. As soon as Bitcoin reaches 110,000 US dollars, this position will be triggered. Of course, if you change your mind afterwards, you can always click on cancel here, and you'll have the option to close the position again. That's all for the topic of limit orders. Now it gets a bit more specific with the market order. This one is much more important because with it we can enter the market directly, meaning at the current moment. What I'm going to do briefly is move the face cam to the left because now we definitely have several options here. We can set up here at the top whether we want everything to be set to isolated or cross. What I would clearly recommend to you is isolated, because with isolated you can only lose as much money as you have put into your trade. With cross, it's like this. Suppose you invest $100 in a trade, but you have $1,000 in your account. Then theoretically, you run the risk that the other $900, which are just sitting in your account, could also be used to keep the trade open. And that's why it's extremely important, especially as a beginner, to select isolated here. This is also, let's say, the default setting, and that's why we click on confirm here. Otherwise, we also have the leverage option here. Leverage simply means that we basically borrow capital or amplify our own trade. You've probably heard of this before as well. For example, if I enter a position with $100, I can use, say, 10 times leverage, and then the calculation is pretty simple. $100 times 10 means my position isn't just $100, but directly $1,000. This way, you have the opportunity to make larger trades even if you don't have a lot of capital. Definitely a great option. Later on, I'll also specifically show which leverage I'll be using in my trading strategy, so you'll definitely be informed about that as well. In this case, I'll just leave it set to 20, just like from the beginning. I'll click on confirm here. So that's the leverage setting for now, which is definitely one of the options we have. We can now directly enter the cost value here in USDT. As I mentioned, I've set it up here so that we can always decide how much USDT we want to use to enter the trade. In my case, for example, $200. And now, in addition to that, you also have the option, depending on whether you're entering a long trade, so basically betting on rising prices, or a short trade on falling prices, to set a take profit or stop loss here. In other words, you can decide at what point the trade should be closed, when you want to take profits, and when you want to protect yourself. That's why here you basically have the option to set a trigger. Now, in my case, Bitcoin is currently at 114,700 US dollars. For example, I now want to take my first profits at 116,000 US dollars. That's where I want to realize my very first profit, which in this case would be 40 US dollars that I could gain, so that's what I can get out of this trade, and the stop loss is basically my protection. For that, I'll set it exactly at 114,000 US dollars. With this trade, I can now lose a maximum of 30 US dollars. So that's the current ratio, and that's fine. Yes, in this case, you could also set it a bit higher so that you only take profits at 117,000 US dollars, because as a little rule, as a small reminder, it definitely makes sense to choose a risk-reward ratio of at least 1 to 2, meaning that you should be able to win at least twice as much as you could potentially lose. That is definitely a general rule, and it's certainly important. Once everything is set, you can click on Open Long Position at the bottom right. Then you'll see everything again in an overview here. You'll also see here later, depending on how high your leverage is, you'll have your estimated liquidation price displayed here. When will your trade be closed, so to speak? In my case, at 109,600 US dollars. That would mean a total loss, so in that case I would have lost all my $200 completely, so to speak, because, as mentioned, we're in isolated mode. There we can only lose what we've actually put in. But in this case, an important piece of information. I have set up a safeguard, a so-called stop loss, which means my trade won't only be closed when everything is lost, but I have a safeguard set at 114,000 US dollars. That's why with this trade I can lose a maximum of 31 US dollars. And once I'm definitely satisfied with these settings, I can just click confirm here, and then everything will be opened immediately. Now, at this point, I'm going to move the face cam to the right, because then you'll be able to see here that we now have an open position, and you'll basically have an overview of your positions here. Are you currently in profit or in loss? Now, in this case, as I said, we're freshly in the position. And the nice thing about BingX is definitely that we have an overview here. When will our trade be liquidated, so to speak? Where is our entry point? Where is our stop loss and take profit? And here's a little tip on the side. You can move everything again in the chart afterwards. You can then practically adjust your take profit and stop loss here again, and for example, move them upwards. If everything fits according to the value, we can confirm it here, and then we've definitely moved the order upwards. That's what it looks like in any case. So at this point, it's definitely super simple and relatively clear. We can now see that the first $4 of profit are already coming in. As mentioned, all of this is unrealized. If we want to adjust the trade later on, we can scroll down and then we have the option here to set everything up again, so to speak. Now, when it comes to trade management, it's also important to mention we basically have the option here to close the position. But what's interesting is that on the one hand, we have the option to close using a limit order. That's basically nothing other than a take profit and also by market order. And there's also the possibility for us to realize partial profits. With this slider, so to speak, we can decide how much profit we want to take. We're currently $6 in profit, and what I can do here now is, so to speak, realize $3 of that profit. As I said, this is just an example in this case, and then I can just click confirm here, and in this case we've already realized the first profits. And what you can see here is that my position is now only half as large. In other words, the position has been halved in this case. It's definitely important to mention later on, you'll also have the option to increase your position afterwards by adding more margin here at this point. As I said, we've now realized exactly 50% of my position, and that's why exactly half is represented here now. We initially entered with $200, and now we only have $100 left in this trade because half has already been realized. That's all there is to say about that for now. You also have the option to add more margin afterwards, for example another 100 US dollars, and then the current liquidation price will also shift since there is more collateral provided. That's all there is to say about that for now. And then you can also see here how everything has been adjusted, and you'll also notice that if we increase the amount, our liquidation price has shifted downward. So if one of your trades goes into the negative, you definitely have the option to add more capital to keep the trade open, just so you're definitely informed about that as well. That's all for this topic for now. Otherwise, if you're looking for something very specific about trading, I can definitely recommend this video to you. An XXL crypto trading course for beginners. There you'll get everything explained in detail again, including how to approach trading. It's definitely a cool way to learn about trading strategies as well. But now, as promised, let's move on to the second part of today's video. Now we're going to specifically test out a trading strategy from my side. What we need to do here, in this case, I'm going to close the position for clarity. And for this trading strategy, we need to set up 2 indicators in total. By the way, I've also posted all of this again in my Telegram group. There you definitely have the opportunity to get live trades from me. In this case, the Telegram group is called Vincent Trading Club. I've also linked it in the video description. As I said, it's completely exclusive just for my English-speaking community, it's brand new, and there you'll definitely get a complete overview of individual live trades, specific strategies, and plenty of learning material, so you can really pick up a lot of knowledge there. And today, I've also just posted something brand new there regarding this trading strategy. Specifically, it's a scalping strategy, reversal scalping, Bollinger Band snapback with RSI confirmation, counter trading with structure. And this is how the entire strategy works. Here, we can see how the strategy is put together. By the way, I'll keep you updated on this live. I've also explained everything in detail again in the video description, outlining exactly how the process works. Just write to me on my official account on Telegram. Yes, send me your UID and I'll add you to the group right away. And there you'll definitely get a complete overview regarding the trading strategy. Now we're going to switch over to BingX and set everything up. So we click up here on indicators and select the Bollinger Bands. So we select the Bollinger Bands here in combination with the RSI. These are the 2 indicators we need, relative strength index, and now we've already set up both of them. Then we switch to the 1-minute chart. Yes, it's extremely important for this strategy that we use the 1 minute chart on BingX. Now we're definitely moving on to the trading strategy. So what is the trading strategy? What's it all about? What needs to happen is that we have to see candle closing prices either above or below the Bollinger Bands. So basically, one possibility is that the Bollinger Bands get touched up here, right in this area. As soon as a candlestick body leaves the upper band here, it's definitely a potential short opportunity. Then we basically want to bet on falling prices because in this case, the price is overbought. And of course, it works the other way around as well. If we are oversold, those are of course perfect long opportunities, and that's exactly how the trading strategy works. We always wait for the price to come back in, so to speak. In this case here, we would have entered a perfect short position. I can also show you the whole thing right here. We enter a short position here. Then, for the short position, we set the stop loss at about 0.1%. And what's important here is that we always operate with a positive risk-reward ratio, so in this case, a minimum of, let's say, 0.2 is a good benchmark. There are also ways to set it very, very tight, where you could, for example, set it directly at 0.1%. But my recommendation is definitely to have at least a minimum risk-reward ratio. So here you have 0.1 and here 0.15 is definitely an option. And in this case, we would have entered a short position. Of course, you have to be careful with that. Sometimes it also makes sense to set the whole thing to 0.08 and make it a bit tighter. So it depends on whether you're trading on a 1 minute time frame or on 5 minutes. So there are several possibilities, but the trading strategy definitely works extremely well because we basically always have the opportunity to enter long positions, short positions, depending on where the price is at the moment. And especially with Bitcoin, where there is a lot of volatility, there are a lot of opportunities to keep opening new positions. We can see it here, for example, at this point. You definitely saw here as well that we briefly touched the band, and then accordingly, in this case, we could have immediately entered a short position. And you can also see it works wonderfully because the price keeps making brief contact with the Bollinger Bands and then is immediately sold off. So you can really get quite a few trades with a relatively good hit rate. What we're going to do now is follow the chart live, both for Bitcoin and for other altcoins. And as soon as I get a trade signal here, we'll definitely see each other again right away. We're definitely opening the next long position, in this case for Bittens or Tau. I'll briefly go into the explanation here. I also had to be a bit quick here, because we immediately saw that we are definitely oversold, both in our RSI and, in this case, with the Bollinger Bands. We clearly got a candle close below the Bollinger Band, and that's definitely a sign that we're a bit oversold here. That's why I decided to open a long position here, in this case with a leverage of 31. Overall, the position is $3,000 US, which is something I now like to do in retrospect as well. So you don't always have to set take profit and stop loss right away at this point. Yes, you can also do it right afterwards, and now we basically have the option here to set what percentage do we want to take as our take profit, so to speak, if we wanted to pull everything out at once. I'll do it as an example now. We could basically pull out 10% here, and in this case set our stop loss at 5%. You can also set everything to the maximum here, click on confirm, and then you'll be able to see what our position looks like. As I said, this is just shown here as an example, and then we can basically see our entry price. In addition, we can see our take profit for our position and our stop loss. And now we can basically follow our position live here, seeing how we entered a trade. And in this case, our position was actually closed right away, so we were able to successfully complete our first trade. Of course, I know, before anyone comments, I am well aware that this was set up to be extremely tight. After all, we're looking at the 1 minute chart here. But I just wanted to demonstrate how you can enter positions. How can you set the take profit and the stop loss afterwards? It was important to me to show that once again. You'll get a detailed tutorial from me on this later anyway. And of course, you're welcome to ask me questions about it. There you'll also get direct information on where you should set the take profit and the stop loss. And the whole thing is explained again in detail in this video. So you'll definitely be well informed, but it was important to me to show once again what a potential trading strategy could look like in the case of BingX. Of course, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Of course, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. I've linked everything in the video description, both my Telegram group and of course a link to the platform where you can create an account on BingX. Other than that, I really enjoyed making today's video. As I said, feel free to like and subscribe, and then I'll see you again in the next video.